Welcome to the fourth of 5 video lectures on William Shakespeare's history play Henry IV, Part 1. In this video lecture, I will walk us through the 4 scenes of Act 4 as the action of the play builds toward that culminating battle, that grand finale between Hotspur and Prince Hal. In many ways, the whole play has been building up toward that fight between those two. We've had a lot of foreshadowing in Acts 1, 2, and 3. We're going to see more of that in Act 4. All right, so Act 4, Scene 1 opens with Hotspur on the battlefield. With him, he has his soldiers. He also has his uncle, Worcester, and Worcester's soldiers. And he also has with him here Douglas and Douglas's soldiers. And remember, Douglas is the Scot, and he originally, before the play started, had been an enemy to Hotspur, and that was back when Hotspur was still loyal to Henry IV. Now these three have joined together as rebels. Now, missing from the scene, though, or missing at the beginning of the scene, is Northumberland, Hotspur's father. We met him in Act 1. He's not there, and in a moment we find out why. And also not there is Owen Glendower and his forces. They're not there yet either, and we're going to find out in this scene that they're not coming. Let's dive into the language of the play. So Hotspur has a messenger who comes. So Act 4, Scene 1, line 14. Follow along with me while I read. The messenger says, "These letters come from your father." "Letters from him? Why comes he not himself?" "He cannot come, my lord. He is grievous sick." So Northumberland, Hotspur's father, is not coming, and his men aren't coming either as a result. And at first, Hotspur's upset about this. Rightfully so. A big part of the army that was supposed to be there to support him and his troops isn't there. Line 29, Hotspur replies, "Sick now? Droop now? This sickness doth infect the very lifeblood of our enterprise." He goes on in his next speech, starting at line 43. He has a great metaphor here. He compares it to a limb being chopped off. If you had your arm chopped off, how good would you be in a battle? Same thing, not having his father and his father's forces here. Line 43, a perilous gash, a very limb lopped off. And yet in faith, it is not. And suddenly Hotspur either has a burst of optimism, or he's simply trying to build up the morale of those around him. But he says, wait, maybe this isn't so bad. And yet in faith it is not. His present want seems more than we shall find it. Were it good to set the exact wealth of all our states all at one cast? Like a cast of the dice. Why put all of our resources on this one battle? Maybe it's better that he's not actually here. He goes on a little later, line 76. He's talking about this and he's trying to rationalize. Maybe this is a good thing that his father's forces aren't here. Line 76. "I rather of his absence make this use. It lends a luster and more great opinion, a larger dare to our great enterprise than if the Earl were here. For men must think, if we without his help can make a head," and a head is a armed force, "to push against the kingdom, with his help we shall o'erturn it topsy-turvy down. Yet all goes well, yet all our joints are whole." Yet all goes well, yet all our joints are whole. For right now, it seems good. That's okay. He's not here, but you know what? That just makes the more glory for us. There's going to be a similar line in Henry V when he's talking to his men 2 plays later in the tetralogy. Henry V is going to make a similar claim. Yeah, there's not a lot of us, but when there's fewer of us, that means we get more glory for the victory. So that's sort of the same idea Hotspur is having here. It's an interesting parallel between himself and his rival, Prince, who's still Prince Hal in this play, but later Henry V in the next play. Next, so that messenger leaves. He delivers his bad news. And then another character, Vernon, comes. Richard Vernon, we're meeting him for the first time. He comes along. He'll be important in Acts 4 and 5, though. And he's also one of the rebels. Vernon comes along, and his first bit of news is he says the king is coming. And he's got news that the Prince of Wales, that's Prince Hal, is coming. He says, this is line 90, 89, 87. Line 87. "The Earl of Westmoreland, 7,000 strong, is marching hitherwards. With him Prince John. Prince John is Prince Hal's younger brother. He's an important character in the Henry VI plays, too, that follow. He's an important character here, too, but not as important a character as he will be later. Line 90, Vernon says, and further I have learned the king himself in person is set forth. So we've got the king coming, we've got his second youngest son coming, we've got Westmoreland, and they've got 7,000 troops with them. Now Hotspur, though, this is sort of setting up that big battle to come. He wants to know, what about the Prince of Wales? Where's Prince Hal? Line 94, Hotspur answers, where is his son, the nimble-footed madcap Prince of Wales? And listen to Vernon's response. Now remember, this play, Shakespeare wrote this play to honor Henry V. The whole tetralogy, in many ways, is in honor of Henry V. And in some ways, then, in honor of Queen Elizabeth, too, who's on the throne when he writes the play, because she is a descendant of Henry V. Two lines down, line 98, Vernon says, talking about, listen to the flattery he pours on Prince Hal, and he's supposed to be his enemy. All furnished, all in arms, all plumed like ostriches, that's ostriches, all plumed like ostriches, that with the wind baited like eagles, having lately bathed, glittering in golden coats, like images, as full of spirit as the month of May. Think how the month of May being a month full of spirit. It's a month of springtime turning into summer when things grow and mature. And gorgeous as the sun at midsummer. Wanton as youthful goats, wild as young bulls. I saw young Harry with his beaver on. His beaver is his visor, his warrior, his knight's helmet. With his beaver on, his cuisses on his thighs. His cuisses on his thighs. Had to pronounce that. Cuisses on his thighs. That's the armor that you wear on your thighs to protect it in a battle. Gallantly armed, rise from the ground like feathered Mercury. Mercury's a Greek god. Prince Harry looks like a Greek god. And vaulted with such ease into his seat, as if an angel dropped down from the clouds to turn and wind a fiery Pegasus, and witch the world with noble horsemanship. He just jumped up on his horse. Hotspur doesn't want to hear any more of this praise for his adversary. No more. And he's ready to, he wants to fight. He doesn't want to hear any more praise of Prince Hal. Line 119, he says, come, let me taste my horse, who is to bear me like a thunderbolt against the bosom of the Prince of Wales. Harry to Harry shall, hot horse to horse, meet and ne'er part till one drop down a dead corpse. Oh, that Glendower were come. And here, so it sets up nicely the battle to come in Act 5 that we've been working toward. And then this line, oh, that Glendower were come. Vernon's got more bad news. Owen Glendower's not coming. There is more news. I learned in Worcester as I rode along, he cannot draw his power this 14 days. Owen Glendower, who we saw briefly in the previous act, is not coming. So lots of bad news for Hotspur to start Act 4, but he doesn't care. He wants to fight, and he looks forward to his battle with Prince Hal. Turning to Act 4, Scene 2, we see Falstaff again. And Falstaff, remember, in Act 3 was given a commission to draw up an army of foot soldiers and to bring them to the battle. Falstaff, as you would expect, has not done a very good job, though, of gathering up his foot soldiers. In fact, he has the authority from the king to conscript men into the army to bring men with him. They're required by the king's law to come with him to join the army, but instead he's taken their bribes so that they won't have to come, and he's left the best men behind, and he's brought with him the worst men who couldn't afford the bribe. Act 4, Scene 2, line 9. Follow along with me while I read. If I not be ashamed of my soldiers, I must souse Gurnet. I have misused the king's press damnably. So he's misused the king's authority to press men into the army, into his service. I have got, in exchange of 150 soldiers, 300 and odd pounds. So he's earned some money from these bribes. He's got some 300 pounds, and that's a lot of money. If you remember, 300 pounds is the same amount they would have gotten in that robbery earlier in the play. He's got 300 and odd pounds. I press me none but good householders, yeomen's sons, inquire me out contracted bachelors, such as I'd been asked twice on the bands, such a commodity of warm slaves as had, as lief, hear the devil as a drum, such as fear the report of a cavalier worse than a struck fowl or a hurt wild duck. I press me none but such toasts and butters with hearts in their bellies no bigger than pins' heads. So their hearts are in their bellies, and their hearts are no bigger than pins' heads. They have no heart. These men that he's conscripted into his army, it's a pathetic group of men that he has there fighting. And as he's delivering this soliloquy to us, I can see it to us. He's talking to Bardolph. Prince Hal rides up on his horse, and he says, "Who on earth are these men with you?" This is a great line. Line 46. Him and the prince are talking, and Prince Hal asks Falstaff, "But tell me, Jack, whose fellows are these that come after?" "Mine, Hal, mine." "Ah, I did never see such pitiful rascals." So he's got this group of rascally men as his soldiers. Not in this play, but in the next play, Henry IV, Part 2, we actually get a glimpse of him as he tries to, as he brings other his soldiers together, and it's a wonderful scene as he conscripts them into service. Those who have a little bit of money are able to buy their way out, and acts part 2 of the play actually has a scene that is a little more shows how he does this and how he gets his money instead of men. Not a very loyal thing, not a good thing for Falstaff to do here, but typical of Falstaff's character. Act 4, Scene 3, we're back on the battlefield. Hotspur he doesn't have those men that he was expecting. His father's not come. His Owen Glendower's not come. And Hotspur and Douglas, they both want to fight tonight. So at this point in Scene 1, we knew that there were 7,000 men coming with the king. By this time, they've arrived. We're to believe that Falstaff even has his bunch of rascals have arrived. Prince Hal has arrived. Everyone's ready, and it's this time to fight. Now, Hotspur and Douglas, they'd like to fight right now. They're ready. But his uncle Worcester and Vernon, who we met back in Scene 1 as well, they say we should wait for more of our men to arrive. We don't have everyone. And wait till the next day to fight. So they're having this disagreement. But Hotspur, he's Hotspur. He's hot. He is ready to fight. And he wants to fight now. But as they're having this disagreement between the rebels, and it should be a sign, not only are all of his men not there, those problems, but the fact that these rebel leaders are squabbling over when to fight should be a little bit of foreshadowing as well. This doesn't bode well if you're in the audience watching this and you're thinking the rebels are going to be successful. Of course, we know there's a Henry V play coming up here soon. That gives us some pretty... And the playgoers in Shakespeare's London knew this story already. They knew it well. This was their history. And they enjoyed seeing it dramatized, but the outcome wasn't a surprise. How they got to the outcome, that was the fun part. And they knew the story well, but it's also, I'll pause a moment too to remind us that Shakespeare's history play is not the same as the actual history that played out. And an important point to distinguish is Hotspur was actually quite a bit older than the real Hotspur was actually quite a bit older than the real Prince Harry. And Prince Harry, they didn't actually have this one-on-one battle. This is all what Shakespeare's dramatized to make the play, but that part's fiction. So in some ways, the most important stuff here is fiction. Now, of course, King Henry, that's a little more realistic how Shakespeare's drawn that. But he's drawn the Prince Hal part of the story in a way to make Prince Hal even more honorable than he really was in real life. He was an honorable king, of course, but even a greater king by creating by recreating Hotspur as a character to face off against him. So, all right, back to the play itself, back to Act 4, Scene 3. All of a sudden, Sir Walter Blunt comes upon the camp. And he's got some news. This is line 32. He says, "I come with gracious offers from the king. If you vouchsafe me hearing and respect, I've got an offer from the king. Will you listen to it?" Hotspur says, "Welcome." He says, "I'll listen, but I wish you were of our mind. I wish you were to join us." Blunt's loyal. No, he's never going to do that. You'll remember we saw Sir Walter Blunt back in Act 1. He was in the background at the very beginning of the play. Now we see him on the battlefield, and we'll see him again as well in Act 5. He's an important character here at the end of the play as well. Blunt has an offer for Hotspur and for Worcester, and his offer essentially is, go home and the king will pardon you. Everything you've done will be forgiven and forgotten. just go home. We don't need to have this fight. That's the king's offer. Line 50. Follow along with me while I read Blunt's lines. He bids you name your griefs, and with all speed you shall have your desires with interest, and pardon absolute for yourself and these herein misled by your suggestion. So tell us what you want. Tell us what your griefs are. The king will fix them, and he will let you go home fully pardoned along with all your men who you have misled by your suggestion. At first, Hotspur doesn't want to hear the offer, or he hears the offer, but he doesn't initially accept it or say that he'll accept it. Line 56, he's going to tell his griefs, first of all. He says, line 56, my father, that's Northumberland, who's not there, and my uncle, that's Worcester, who is there, and myself, that's Hotspur talking, my father and my uncle and myself did give him that same royalty he wears. And when he was not 26 strong, sick in the world's regard, wretched and low, a poor unminded outlaw sneaking home, my father gave him welcome to the shore. So years and years ago, when Henry IV overthrew Richard II, it was me and my father and my uncle who helped him. And he goes on for a long time talking about how he helped him. You'll notice here what's missing from the argument is Mortimer. That was so important a part of Act 1. Even in Act 3 we saw that. Mortimer's not here. So now the argument's changed a little bit. It's gotten a little bit muddy, a little bit cloudy, exactly what Hotspur is even fighting over. But part of his anger is, I helped the king to his place, and now I've been mistreated as a result of that. And remember, he had to give up his prisoners in Act 1. He's angry about that, but it's sort of the reasoning gets cloudy here. If Blunt cuts him off, he says, "Tut! I came not to hear this," line 91. And then Hotspur gets to it. He says, I'm going to get to the point then. So he lists all these how he had helped the king in the past. Then to the point. In short time after, he deposed the king. So remember, notice here, the king is Henry IV. But when Hotspur says it, he's actually referring to the previous king, to Richard II. He, meaning Henry IV, deposed the king, meaning Richard II. It's interesting how his logic changes here. So now he's angry that Henry IV deposed the king, but he himself just moments ago said that he had helped him to do it. So is he angry at himself for helping? You can see what I mean here about the argument getting cloudy. In short time after, he deposed the king. Soon after that, deprived him of his life, killed Richard II. And in the neck of that, tasked the whole state to make that worse, suffered his kinsman March, referring now to Mortimer, who is, if every owner were well placed, indeed his king, to be engaged in Wales, there without ransom to lie forfeited. Disgraced me in my happy victories. He disgraced him by not letting him keep his own prisoners, but by enforcing him to turn them over. He never did that like he was told. He instead gave them back without ransom. Disgraced me in my happy victories, sought to entrap me by intelligence, raided mine uncle from the council board. Remember back in Act 1, Worcester got kicked out before he was even allowed to speak in Act 1. Enraged, dismissed my father from the court, broke oath on oath, committed wrong on wrong, and in conclusion drove us to seek out this head of safety, and withal to pry into his title, to question the king's authority, to question the king's right to be king. He's enraged at this point. Remember in Act 1, he was enraged too, and he couldn't be interrupted, and finally the Blunt doesn't want to hear anymore. I've heard enough. I told you what the king's offer was. He would hear your griefs. You've gone on, and indeed he has gone on. This started back at line 53, and now we're at line 112, so some 60 lines of him just ranting. Blunt says, "Shall I return this answer to the king?" And finally Hotspur catches his breath a moment. He has a moment of reflection. He says, "No." Line 108, he says, "Not so, Sir Walter. We'll withdraw a while. Go to the king, and let there be pawned some surety for a safe return again. And in the morning early shall mine uncle bring him our purposes." So no, don't take this to the king yet. Let me sleep on it. Let me think about it. And in the morning, I'll send my uncle with my response. It's interesting. At the beginning of scene 4, he said he wanted to fight now, and he didn't want to take his uncle's advice to wait till tomorrow. Now he's decided he's going to wait until tomorrow. He's going to think this over, although it's taken the entire scene to convince him of this. Hotspur is renowned as a warrior. Even Prince Hal, when we get to Act 5, is going to talk about how renowned he is as a soldier. But but he certainly has a temper, and when he wants to do something, he wants to do it, and he doesn't want to spend too much time thinking about it, but he's convinced here to take some more time, to take an evening to consider this. It's an interesting moment for Hotspur, a moment perhaps even of growth here at the end. There's a nice end too. Blunt says, I would you would accept of grace and love. And Hotspur says, and maybe so we shall. He says maybe. He doesn't say yes. He doesn't say no to the offer. He says maybe. And Blunt says, pray God you do. There's a lot of men on this battlefield who would like to avoid the war. All the way from Falstaff, who wants to avoid it because he's a coward, up to Blunt and even Hotspur, who want to avoid it for more chivalrous reasons, to spare lives. Is it really worth fighting for? There seems to be a moment here where both sides are considering this. Certainly the king would like to spare lives here if he could. That's not going to happen. We're going to find that out in Act 5. Act 4, Scene 4. This is the shortest scene in the play. This scene we meet, there's a character we meet in this scene who only appears in this very short scene. We've heard him talked about. It's the Archbishop of York. Archbishop of York is going to be an important character in Henry IV Part 2. And in many ways, this little tiny scene is to set up Henry IV Part 2. And in fact, this scene, if the performance is alone, if it's just Henry IV Part 1, a lot of acting companies won't even do this scene. They won't include it. Now, if it's Part 2 is going to happen next, because a lot of times companies will do will do Henry IV Part 1 and Henry IV Part 2. If they're going to do both, then this scene fits very nicely because it sets up the other play. The Archbishop here he's not joined the battle as he said he would. A lot of people have bailed on Hotspur, but he's worried that Hotspur will lose, and that after he loses the war, that the king and his men will come looking for the Archbishop of York. They'll come to York. Line 28, Archbishop says, the king hath drawn at the special head of all the land together, the Prince of Wales, Lord John of Lancaster. Remember, the Prince of Wales is Prince Harry, Prince Hal. Lord John of Lancaster, that's his younger brother. We talked about him a few minutes ago. The noble Westmoreland and warlike Blunt, and we just met Blunt, and many more carivals and dear men of estimation and command in arms. Skipping down just a little bit, line 37, he's talking with Sir Michael, another minor character we only see in this scene. If Lord Percy, referring to Hotspur, if Lord Percy thrive not, ere the king dismiss his power, he means to visit us. So before the king lets his soldiers go back home, remember all those soldiers that have been conscripted into the army, before he dismisses them, he'll come here. He'll come looking for us. For if Lord Percy thrive not, ere the king dismiss his power, he means to visit us, for he hath heard of our confederacy. And so ends Act 4 of the play. In Act 5, we will finally get to see that main event, that grand finale we've been waiting for, when Prince Hal faces off against Hotspur. All right, till then.